My wife lied to me on the phone. She was spending the night at her sister's. She didn't know I was staring right at her. Hey, babe, I'm going to sleep over at Lydia's tonight. She's having a hard time. I might not be reachable. Her Wi-Fi is acting up. Don't wait up. Those were the words. That was the voice, warm, unhurried, laced with the exact softness she had always used on me when she wanted me to stop asking questions. And it worked. It always worked. My name is Ebenezer James, and I was 34 years old, sitting in a parked car in the rain outside a restaurant I had never been to before, holding a phone to my ear and smiling at the sound of my wife's voice. Because even then, even in that moment, it was a voice I loved. Okay, love, take care of her, I said. I hung up. I set the phone on the passenger seat. I looked up, and through the floor-to-ceiling glass window of the restaurant directly across the street, I saw a woman in a red dress throw her head back, laughing at something the man across from her had said. The way her head tilted, backward, slightly to the left, her whole body giving itself over to the sound. I would have known that laugh through a wall. I would have known it in the dark. I had been falling asleep to that laugh for 6 years. It was Esther. I want to tell you that I immediately understood everything in that moment. That some clean and cinematic clarity descended on me, and I became a man of action. But that's not what happened. What happened was smaller and more terrible than that. What happened was that my brain, out of pure self-preservation, spent about 4 full seconds trying to construct an explanation. Maybe she changed her mind. Maybe Lydia's apartment was nearby and she stepped out for a moment. Maybe she had called me from that very restaurant and the noise was behind her and I simply hadn't noticed. 4 seconds. That was all my mind could manage before it gave up, because the man across from her reached over and moved a strand of hair from her face. Slowly, casually, the way a man touches a woman when touching her has become a habit. And she smiled at him the way she used to smile at me. I had helped her pick out that red dress. Last Valentine's Day, she had stood in the store fitting room and turned around and asked me what I thought, and I had said she looked like someone worth being late for. She had laughed, that same laugh, and bought it on the spot. I was staring at the dress I had encouraged her to buy, worn for a man whose name I did not yet know. I did not go inside. I don't fully know why, even now. Something in me, the same something my father beat into my mother and my mother whispered into me at a graveside, said, "Not yet. Watch. Know everything first." So I sat in the rain, and I watched. I picked up my phone and called Lydia. She picked up on the second ring. There was noise behind her, a television, or music, something light and domestic, and she answered the way she always answered me, with a kind of easy warmth that had never felt like performance until that exact moment. "Ebenezer. Hey, what's up?" I had known Lydia for 8 years. I had watched her cry at our wedding. I had driven her home from the hospital the night her appendix nearly killed her because her husband was stuck on a flight and Esther was the one she called, and Esther called me. I had sat in that waiting room for 4 hours and brought her flowers the next morning. I thought I knew Lydia Stein the way you know people who have been inside your worst nights. "Hey, Lydia," I said. My voice came out completely normal. That surprised me. "Is Esther with you?" A pause. Not a long one. Half a second, maybe less. The kind of pause that a person who wasn't already watching for something wrong would never have caught. But I was watching. I was watching everything now. "Yeah, she just got here actually. She's in the bathroom." I closed my eyes. I want you to understand something about that moment. The betrayal I felt sitting in that car watching Esther through a restaurant window was one kind of pain. Sharp, physical almost, like something structural giving way. But the pain of hearing Lydia's voice deliver that lie so smoothly, so immediately, without a single crack, that was a different kind. That was the kind that makes you question your entire history. Every dinner, every holiday, every moment where you thought you were surrounded by people who loved you and were therefore safe. Lydia had covered for her. Not once. This felt practiced. This felt like a woman who had told this particular lie, or versions of it, enough times that it no longer cost her anything. "Tell her I said good night," I said. "I will. Sleep well, Ebenezer." I hung up. Across the street, Esther was still laughing. I thought about my father then, which I almost never do voluntarily. I thought about how he used to sit at the kitchen table with this very particular stillness when something had gone wrong, and how the whole house would go quiet around that stillness the way animals go quiet before a storm. I hated that stillness when I was a child. I thought it was cruelty, that silence. I thought it was a man choosing to make everyone else suffer the weight of what he knew. I understood it now in a way I wish I didn't. I sat in that car for 22 more minutes. I know because I watched the clock. I watched the clock because watching the clock was something to do other than keep staring through the window, though I did that too. I watched the man signal for another bottle of wine. I watched Esther cover the top of her glass with her hand and shake her head and smile. Even now, even in the middle of whatever this was, she wasn't drinking too much. She was still herself. That detail broke something in me that I haven't been able to name since. At some point I started the car. I drove home. I did not play music. I did not call anyone. I drove through the rain with both hands on the wheel the way my mother taught me when I was 17. And I thought about the fact that Esther was sitting in a restaurant with a man whose name I didn't know while her sister told me she was in the bathroom. And I thought about the 6 years I had spent building a life that I apparently had not fully understood. I parked in the driveway. I sat there for another few minutes. Then I went inside and sat at the kitchen table in the dark. And I did the thing I always do when I don't know what to do. I got very, very still. And I started to think. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in the bed we shared and stared at the ceiling and listened to the house make its sounds, the refrigerator cycling on, the pipes settling, the rain finally stopping somewhere around 2 in the morning. And I thought about all the things I had not paid attention to. That is the part no one tells you about betrayal. It's not just the thing itself. It's the archaeology of it. The way your mind goes back through everything. Every late return, every distracted dinner, every night she rolled away from you in bed and you told yourself she was tired, and starts reclassifying. Starts asking, was that one? Was that the beginning? How far back does this go? I thought about a Thursday in October, 4 months prior, when Esther told me she was working late. I remembered it specifically because I had planned a small thing, nothing grand, just her favorite takeout and a film she had mentioned wanting to see. I had it all set up by 7. By 9 I had eaten alone and was watching the film without her. She came home at 10:30 and apologized and said her boss had kept the whole team. I had rubbed her shoulders and told her it was fine. I pulled out my phone in the dark and opened the parking app we both used for the building where she worked. It logged entries and exits automatically. I had never had a reason to look at it before. October, the Thursday she worked late. No entry logged. No exit. Her car had not been in that building that day at all. I put the phone face down on the mattress beside me. I thought about a weekend in September when she went to what she described as a work conference 2 hours away. She had packed a bag on Friday morning, kissed me at the door, and come back Sunday evening sunburned and loose and full of stories about team dinners and a hotel pool. I had listened to every story. I had asked questions. I had been glad she was back. I thought about a document I had seen 6 months ago, a letterhead sliding out of her open bag on the kitchen counter. Wren Property Development Group. I had picked it up and placed it back without a second thought. She worked in commercial real estate. She dealt with developers constantly. It had meant nothing to me. What I hadn't seen, because I hadn't looked closely enough, because I had never needed to look closely before, was the page underneath it. The post-it note in handwriting that wasn't hers. I didn't know that yet. I would only understand it later. But lying there in the dark, I kept thinking about that document and the feeling I couldn't locate, the thing that had passed through me when I touched it and dissolved before I could examine it. Some frequency below conscious thought. The body knowing something the mind refused to process. I got up at 3 in the morning and went to the bedroom wardrobe. Her side. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I moved through her things carefully, the way a person moves through a space they have no right to disturb. Slowly, replacing everything exactly as I found it. Her folded sweaters. The shelf of shoes. The back of the wardrobe where the things she didn't use daily lived in soft neglect. I moved a showbox. Behind it, slightly recessed, was another showbox I didn't recognize. Plain. No brand on the lid. I lifted the lid. Inside was a phone. A second phone. Turned off, its screen dark, a small charger coiled beside it like it was being kept alive deliberately. Kept ready. I picked it up. It was light, lighter than it should have been for the weight it carried. I stood there for a long time holding it. I thought about turning it on right then. I had every reason to. I had every right to. But something stopped me. Not weakness, not fear. Something more strategic than either of those things. A voice that sounded like my own but older, more patient. Not yet. If you turn it on now and she finds out you found it, everything closes. Wait. Be certain. Know everything before you show her you know anything. I placed it back exactly as I found it. I replaced the showbox. I closed the wardrobe. I went back to bed. I stayed at the ceiling until the light changed from black to gray to the pale early blue that means morning is arriving whether you are ready for it or not. I was not ready for it, but I was there. She came home at 9:47 the next morning. I heard the key in the lock before I saw her. I was already at the kitchen counter making coffee, and I had made a decision somewhere between 4 a.m. and now. I was going to be completely normal. I was going to give her nothing. Not suspicion, not coldness, not the careful overwarmth that guilty people recognize in the people they've wronged. Just Ebenezer. Just a Tuesday morning. She came in and wrapped her arms around me from behind the way she always did when she'd been away overnight. She smelled like hotel soap, not Lydia's apartment. I had been in Lydia's apartment enough times to know the particular smell of her cheap vanilla diffuser. This was something clinical and expensive. Something that cost $60 a night minimum. Morning, love. Did you sleep okay? Like a rock, I said. She sat at the counter and told me everything. The whole story arrived fully formed, richly detailed. How Lydia had cried for the first hour, how they'd watched their mother's favorite old film, how they'd ordered jollof rice from the late-night place on Lydia Street, how they'd finally fallen asleep around 2. The details were so specific that I almost doubted myself for half a second. Almost. But I had been in that parking lot. I had watched with my own eyes. How was the restaurant you went to? I said, lightly, stirring my coffee. She didn't flinch. Not even slightly. We ordered in. Lydia didn't want to go out. I looked at her. She held my eyes with the clean, open gaze of someone completely innocent. Smart, I said. Food's always better at home. She smiled and picked up her phone. And I turned back to the stove, and I kept my breathing even. And I thought, 14 months. It has been going on for 14 months. I don't know that yet, but I will. That afternoon, Lydia's car pulled into the driveway. I saw it from the window first, and my whole body went still in that way it had been doing since the night before. A sudden careful stillness, like a man on ice who has just heard a crack beneath his feet. She didn't know I had called her last night. She didn't know I had been in that parking lot. As far as Lydia was concerned, she had covered for her sister and the night had passed without incident. She arrived the way she always arrived, keys jangling, smile ready, carrying the casual confidence of someone who had done nothing wrong. I had convinced herself of that. Esther met her at the door and they hugged. Over Lydia's shoulder, Esther's eyes did something quick and involuntary. A sweep, a check, the silent question that passes between two people who are keeping a secret about a third person standing in the same room. Did he say anything? Are we okay? I was watching from the kitchen doorway. I made tea. I brought it to the living room. I sat down. So how are you doing, Lydia? I said. Esther mentioned you were going through a hard time. Lydia nodded. She had a good face for this. Warm eyes. Convincing. Yeah, it's been a rough few weeks. I'm glad she came. She always shows up for the people she loves, I said. Both women smiled at that. Genuine smiles, even. The kind that arrive before the brain can screen them. I smiled too. But something happened in the room then. Some shift in temperature that came from me sitting too still, speaking too evenly, being too pleasant in a way that had no ragged edges. Lydia looked at me for 1 second too long. I watched her recalibrate. I watched something small and cold move through her eyes before she looked away and changed the subject just slightly faster than a person with nothing to hide would need to. She knew I knew. She didn't know how much. But she felt it. Good, I thought. Feel it. 3 days passed. On the third night, while Esther stood in the shower, I went back to the wardrobe. I moved the showbox. I picked up the second phone. I turned it on. It took 90 seconds to boot. I stood in the wardrobe with the door half open, listening to the water running, counting my own heartbeats. Password protected. I tried our anniversary, the 22nd of June. Wrong. I tried her mother's birthday, March 3rd, wrong. I stood there for a moment. Then I typed in the date we met. The 14th of March, 8 years ago. A rainy Saturday at a mutual friend's dinner party where I had arrived late, and she had been the only person still seated at the table because she hated standing around making noise she described as performative socializing. I had sat down beside her because I felt the same way. We had talked for 3 hours without noticing anyone else in the room. The phone opened. I looked at the screen for a long time. What I saw didn't just hurt me. It reorganized me. It took everything I understood about my life and shuffled it into a new order that I didn't recognize and couldn't yet read. I turned the phone face down against my palm. I heard the shower turn off. I put it back, replaced the box, walked out of the bedroom, sat down on the front steps of the house and put my head in my hands and breathed the cold evening air until I trusted my face again. I did not cry. I want to be honest about that. I wanted to. There was something enormous pressing behind my eyes that needed somewhere to go. But it didn't come. Not then. I think some part of me knew that if I started, I wouldn't be able to stop, and I needed to be able to function. I needed to know more. I needed the full picture before I came apart. So I swallowed it. The way my mother taught me to swallow things. The way she swallowed 30 years of a bad marriage without a single public tear. I went back inside and cooked dinner. 2 days after that, I came home early. I had told no one at work. I simply left at 3 in the afternoon, drove home, pulled into the driveway, and sat in the car for a moment. The bedroom curtains were drawn the way they were when she was doing something that required concentration, a work call, sometimes, or reading. Normal enough. I got out slowly and let myself in quietly, the way you do when you don't want to disturb anyone, setting my keys down on the entry table without the usual jangle. I heard her voice from the bedroom before I reached the hallway. She was on the phone, door slightly open. Her voice was low but not low enough. He doesn't know anything. I promise you, he doesn't suspect a thing. I stopped walking. No, I told you, I handled it. Lydia covered for me. Pause. Longer pause. I know, but I need more time. Just give me more time. I stood in that hallway and I thought about the man who had almost opened a car door in the rain. I thought about how close I had come to walking into that restaurant and blowing everything open before I understood the full shape of what I was dealing with. I was glad, then, that I hadn't, because what I was hearing now was a woman who believed, completely, comfortably believed, that she was safe, that she had managed it, that I was still standing in the dark. I love you too, she said. I walked to the kitchen. I turned on the stove. I started cooking the way I do every Tuesday, quietly, methodically, from memory. And when she came out 20 minutes later in her house clothes, hair slightly damp, phone nowhere visible, I turned around and smiled at her. You hungry? She said yes. She kissed my cheek. She sat at the counter and told me about her day. I listened to every word. I went back to the restaurant the following Saturday morning. Not to make a scene. I want to be clear about that. I am my mother's son, and my mother always said that the person who shouts first loses the argument before it begins. I went to gather information the way a man builds a case. Methodically, without emotion, one piece at a time. I spoke to the front-of-house manager. I told him I thought I might have left something at a table 2 weeks ago, the corner table near the window. I described it casually. I even described the couple, warmly, as though they were friends of mine who had recommended the place. The manager smiled without thinking about it. Oh, Mr. Wren's table. He books that corner most Friday evenings. He's quite a regular. I nodded like the name meant nothing. Right. Do you know what he does? I feel like Esther mentioned something. Property, maybe. Property development. Yes. I believe it's quite a large firm. I thanked him. I left. I sat in my car and searched the name on my phone. Wren Property Development Group. The results loaded. And then I remembered the document on the kitchen counter 6 months ago. The letterhead I had picked up and replaced without reading. My stomach dropped through the car seat. I had held the answer in my own hands 6 months ago and put it back without knowing what it was. Marcus Wren, 41 years old. Self-made. Property empire built across 3 countries. His face on the company website. Confident, well-kept, the kind of man who was used to being the most capable person in any room. I stared at his photo for a long time. And then I did something I hadn't expected myself to do. I thought about Esther approaching him. Not the other way. Because I knew her. I knew how she moved when she wanted something. That particular focused warmth she turned on like a beam. He hadn't hunted her. She had chosen this door and walked through it herself. That was the detail that hurt most of all. I called Lydia on a Wednesday and asked her to meet me for coffee. My voice was easy. I told her I just wanted to check in, that she'd seemed a little off the last time I saw her and I wanted to make sure she was okay. It was the kind of thing I would have done before any of this, which is exactly why I used it. She arrived looking nervous in the way people look nervous when they've been waiting for something bad and can't tell if it's arrived yet. She covered it well. Bright greeting, quick hug, both hands around her coffee cup. But I had known Lydia for 8 years, and I knew the particular set of her jaw when she was holding something down. I bought her coffee. I asked about her life, her job, her husband. I was warm and unhurried. I asked if she was feeling better. She said yes, much better. Thank you for asking. And then I placed my phone on the table, face up. On the screen was a screenshot from the second phone. Just one image. I won't describe it fully here. I'm not able to, even now, without something breaking loose in my chest. I will say that it was a photograph that Marcus Wren had sent of Esther asleep in a hotel room, early morning light across her face, utterly at peace. He had captioned it, "My favorite view." That was the face I married. That was the face I had watched sleep on my own pillow for 6 years. And someone had photographed it like a trophy. Lydia looked at it. All the color left her face at once, like someone had pulled a plug. "Ebenezer." "Don't," I said quietly. "Just tell me how long." Her hand went over her mouth. Her eyes filled. She looked like a woman watching something she helped build collapse in real time. "I told her to stop," she said. Her voice came out wrecked. "I told her so many times." I looked at my coffee. "How long, Lydia?" A long silence. Long enough that the cafe noise around us felt almost loud. 14 months, she said. Esther texted at 6 o'clock that evening. "Dinner's ready. Where are you?" I didn't respond. She called at 7. I watched the phone ring and set it face down on the table in front of me. She called at 8. Voicemail. I was sitting in a bar I had never been to before. Not drinking, just sitting, nursing a sparkling water, watching football on a screen I wasn't actually watching. I needed to be somewhere that wasn't our house. I needed to be somewhere that didn't have her smell in it, her coffee cup in the drying rack, her cardigan on the back of the kitchen chair. I needed one night inside a neutral space where I was just a man sitting alone, and not a man whose life had been restructured without his knowledge for over a year. By 9, she was calling Lydia. I knew because Lydia sent me a single text. "She's trying to reach you." I'm not answering. I didn't respond to that either. At 11:47, I drove home. I let myself in. I went to the fridge and poured a glass of water and drank half of it standing at the counter with my back to the room. When I turned around, she was in the doorway in her housecoat, arms folded across her chest, relief and something else, something more careful, moving across her face. "Where were you?" she said. I set the glass down. I looked at her for a long moment. The woman I had loved for 8 years. The woman who had stood in a restaurant fitting room and asked me what I thought of a red dress. "I've been thinking," I said, "about us." Something shifted in her face. That particular stillness that arrives when a person realizes the ground under them is no longer what they thought it was. "What do you mean?" she said. "I think you should sit down, Esther." And she knew. I watched her know it. I watched it move through her like cold water, from her eyes down through her whole body, the understanding that the man standing in front of her had not been in the dark at all, that he had been watching, that he had known and waited and gathered every piece, and now he was standing in the kitchen at midnight with all of it in his hands. She sat down. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same table we had eaten breakfast at for 6 years. The same chairs. The salt shaker between us that she'd bought from a market in Portugal on our 3rd anniversary. Everything the same. Everything completely different. I told her all of it. The parking lot. The rain. The red dress. The call to Lydia. The second phone and what was on it. The document I had touched 6 months ago and placed back without reading. The conversation I had heard from the hallway. Marcus Wren's name and his company and his photograph on the website and the way I had recognized the letterhead before I even understood why. I delivered it the way I had been rehearsing it since 4 a.m. on that first night. Quietly, in order, without raising my voice. My father's weapon had always been volume. Mine was precision. She stopped denying it after about 30 seconds. The crying arrived slowly and then all at once. She talked for a long time. She said it had started as a professional connection, that he was charming and attentive at a point when she had been feeling invisible, which I heard and absorbed without reacting to. She said she had tried to end it. Twice. Maybe 3 times. She said she knew it was wrong. She said the word sorry more times than I could count, and each time she said it I believed that she meant it and also understood that it changed nothing structural. I listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, the kitchen was very quiet. "I know you love me," I said. "That's the part one can't figure out." She reached across the table then. Her hand, palm up, the way it always was when she was asking me for something without wanting to say the words. I looked at her hand for a long moment. The ring she was still wearing. The small scar on her index finger from a cooking accident in our first apartment. "I need you to leave tonight, Esther," I said. "The house has never been this quiet. I'm sitting at the kitchen table at 5:43 in the morning, and the light is doing that particular early thing where it isn't quite light and isn't quite dark. Just a gray, suspended in between that feels like the world holding its breath. There are 2 cups of coffee on the table in front of me. I made 2. Out of 6 years of muscle memory, I made 2. I noticed what I had done, and I didn't throw the second one away. I just left it there, sitting across from mine, steam rising from both. My phone has 12 missed calls. 3 from Esther, 9 from people I love who have been told a version of last night and are now choosing their allegiances before anyone has the full picture. Her mother, her aunt, Lydia, twice, which surprised me. I had thought Lydia would call. I had thought she might be the one person who called not to argue but simply to say I'm sorry I lied to you. Maybe that's what she was calling for. I haven't listened to the voicemails yet. I turned the phone face down. I think about my father sitting at a table in a quiet house. I spent my whole life not wanting to be him, not wanting that stillness that scared everyone around it. But I am sitting in it now, and I understand finally that it was never cruelty. It was just a man trying to hold himself together while everything else came apart. The stillness wasn't a weapon. It was a life raft. My mother whispered to me at that graveside, "Promise me you'll never be him." I kept that promise. I never shouted. I never shattered things. I never made her small. I'm not sure that's enough comfort right now. But it is what it is. My phone buzzes. 1 message. From Esther. 4 words. "I am so sorry." I read it twice. I set the phone down on the table next to the second cup of coffee that I made out of habit for a woman who isn't here anymore. I look at them both for a while. Then I get up and open the front door and take my cup out to the front steps, and I sit down in the cold gray morning and I take the first sip. The street is empty. The neighbors are still sleeping. The whole world is still going, the way it always does, completely indifferent to what is happening inside any given house on any given morning. I sit with that, and I drink my coffee. Alone.